Excellent. So today we're going to be talking about Performance Max. This is a presentation I gave at Friends of Search a while back in the summer. So some of the references that I have in here, I have updated them, but they did have a little bit more timeline until that most people were about to start upgrading, or I hate that word, or updating, or changing, transitioning, switching Smart Shopping to Performance Max. So there's some different things that we can talk about a little bit more directly, and I'll assume that most of you in today's presentation have actually already made made changes so that you are on Performance Max. If not, you have a week or so left until they will force change you, which I highly recommend you don't wait on. So yeah, today we're going to go through. We don't have to talk about me. Everybody knows who I am and what I do. I assume, seeing that you're on this webinar. But today we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of Performance Max. So we're going to start off with the good, then we're going to talk about the bad, and then we're going to talk about the ugly. I want to start out by saying that this is not a Google bashing. This is not a blind just I don't like Performance Max, or I want control, or I want some of these things. The whole gist with why it is that I'm not a huge fan for the advertisers that we work with, which is pure digital native e-commerce businesses, highly technically savvy, is that I don't like that you don't have the insights, and we're going to go into some of these things later on. If you come up with any questions throughout the presentation, you can just get the just answer, put a question into the Q&A, and then we will take it from there. Lucas, before we get started, do you mind just opening up the chat room? Then it will be a lot better, and just hide non-video participants. That will be awesome. So for the good, we'll talk about performance out of the box. We'll talk about how you're actually not forced to opt into everything. We'll talk about some of the good things in terms of you get more insights with Performance Max than you ever did with Smart Shopping, so that's a good thing. Then the whole question is, should you upgrade? I hate that word. I put it in there, and now I am 100% decided against using the word upgrade. But should you switch to Performance Max? And then we're going to talk about, like, if you can't beat Performance Max, then what's the point of even trying anything else? So to get started, what we've seen so far and what we switched Smart Shopping to Performance Max is that it's fairly similar to Smart Shopping in terms of the performance, especially if you run it on the shopping only setup. It means that you can set it so it only allows you to run shopping ads at the full Performance Max, and in the like underlying, this is how you're supposed to do it from Google with assets, text ads, display images and videos. That's not what we've run the most, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. But I'll tell you, but it's not what we've run the most of. But we do have some experiences with it, and I've of course spoke with a lot of people in the industry. But the whole gist of today is that you don't need to opt into the full setup. So the full, what I call full Performance Max, runs on both search, shopping, display, and YouTube, where you can create a setup that allows you to only focus on the shopping ads ad format, so to speak. It's a horrible naming, but that's what it's called. So when I say the shopping ads ad format, I'm referring to this, I'm referring to the search network where we have the carousel of the products, or we have the product box out on the right, where it's showing where all the shopping ads are shown. We also have it on the image tab. You can see that there. We also have it on the display network with the display retargeting. Display retargeting that's built into Performance Max and built into Smart Shopping as well. We also have it on YouTube with the product ads that are mentioned out on the right, or right below a video. So that's the shopping ads ad formats. I'm actually not sure these days if Gmail also includes. I have a tendency to think so, but I'm not entirely sure. One of the things that I really like about the switch to Performance Max is that it's committed to more insights. So we get this, for instance, a week-over-week overview. You can see, okay, what's been the performance week over week, what's the cost, what's the ROAS, what's the conversion value, what's the conversions, and some top insights. You get some recommendations to what you can potentially do if you want to advertise all your products. this recommendation came based off that we had the product in another Performance Max campaign. So sometimes recommendations aren't that savvy, which we're going to get into in a second. We do get some search term data. I've seen some people lately like complaining that there's not full search term data. They do not know what they're talking about. This is absolutely gold compared to what they got with Smart Shopping. You had no idea what you had with Smart Shopping, but you do with Performance Max. And that's something that I told, I forgot his name. I'm at the global product lead for Performance Max at the conference back in July. And I told him, this is one of the best things. And he said that they are committed to providing even more insights, and with the demand forecast and other things that are coming out, I do think that that's something that we will really, really cherish with running Performance Max as a shopping ads only campaign type, because we do get more asset, we do get more, we do get more insights than we've ever done before. And here's just a small segment in terms of the audiences. So we do get more insights, we do get more data, we do get more things that we can actually use to improve the campaigns, which is something that is very, very, very good. I never liked the Smart Shopping complete black box. You couldn't see anything. So this is a lot better. So should you, quote unquote, upgrade? Now we're here. There is no choice. So the only thing I'll mention to you here is that the question really is, should you change over to Performance Max? And I assume most of you have changed over to Performance Max, because that's what I hear out there. It's very few that I've spoken to that have gone back to standard shopping. So so my recommendation is right now, just if you have if you're upgrading right now, don't use the button. Some of the things that I've heard reports out there that if you use the tool to upgrade, then it removes your ability to remove assets, which is the text ads, the videos, the images, and that is something we need to be able to remove. So if you haven't done it yet, that could be. You have to. I assume most of you have made the change. So the initial shopping only setup is something that I was very surprised to hear when it actually initially just when it actually was when I found out that it was possible. I heard a couple of rumors on LinkedIn, and then I tried to set up myself, and I spoke with some of our clients, some who are. They have to only run on shopping, not allowed to run on search, and they confirmed as well. Google also confirmed. The Twitter liaison also confirmed it is possible to run it in a smart shopping type of way, which is what I recommend everybody today to do. I will not understand anybody who runs over to run a full Performance Max setup right when you make the switch. If you want to add more assets to it in the future and do other things, more power to you. It could be a potentially good thing, but initially I would recommend everybody to do this where we run it on shopping where you run it on the on the shopping only setup. The way that the shopping only setup works is that you create asset groups, but with no assets. You remove all assets, no text ads, no images, no videos. You should potentially exclude your brand. If you do set it up like this, then it will not show up on search, and then the branded term becomes less of an issue. But if you are the kind of business where you did have, let's say, just 10 or not 10, let's say 50, 100, 200 conversions minimum on your brand, which is not that much inside Google Shopping, you don't want to have it show up within the Performance Max network. You will never know what it is that you are actually performing, which you're actually running for. If you want to exclude your brand terms and you don't have access to a Google Rep or CSS partner, just contact Google support and they will do it. In the future, there will also be account level negatives, which is a whole other conundrum we'll try to unwrap at another presentation. But this is the shopping only setup. It's really, really simple. Just remove all assets. Performance Max as your baseline. I should say that I've been asked about this over the last couple of months. Technically, you should take off or remove final URL expansion for the shopping only setup. just as fail safe, but really like you shouldn't have to do that. If you remove all text and image assets, then it will not create responsive search ads for you to be able to run on search. So thereby the final URL expansion doesn't really matter. So our whole gist is Performance Max can be used as your baseline, because this whole thing, and it has a lot to do with agencies as well. Like if you can't beat it, why even bother run it? Why bother trying to beat other things? So let's say you have a baseline of a you start a shopping only baseline Performance Max setup. That's your baseline. That's like the underlying. If you've run a single smart shopping campaign, that's the same thing you'll do here. If you split it up, that's of course what you'll do when you start it, but that's your baseline. That's where you're starting. And once you've done that, you will move over to splitting up the Performance Max. I'll tell you more about why you should do that at a later stage. Once you've done that and you have decent results using that, then you'll try a standard shopping campaign setup if you can find a reason to do it. If you can't find a reason to do it, don't do it. There's no value going into a standard shopping campaign setup if you're not using priorities, if you're not using insights to search terms, if you're not using some of these abilities that you have with standard shopping. And once you've done that, then you just focus on work best. If your standard shopping campaign setup did not beat your Performance Max setup, there's no need to run it anymore. There's no need to pay an agency to run it anymore. You can't you should just focus on Performance Max. Again, it can be your agency that runs it. I really don't care. It can be yourself that runs it. If your account is really big, it should be somebody competent. But don't let this thing where you either let in-house people or other people try to tell you that you have to run a standard shopping setup. We run a lot of them, but that's because we can see there's a reason behind it. We can use priorities to do better, which I'll talk about in a second. And it just focus on what worked the best. If I have a quick question from Henry, what about the final URL, brand logo, business name? These are original assets from Smart Shopping. So that's what I was alluding to in the earlier slides. We have gotten reports in that if you do decide to upgrade, and this is only from the last couple of weeks, that if you do decide to upgrade, click the upgrade button, then some of these assets can't be removed. And then I recommend starting a brand new Performance Max campaign. What we've seen is that there is no correlation between the performance in the Smart Shopping and the performance in the Performance Max campaign. We have seen campaigns continue performance once they're moved over from Smart Shopping to Performance Max. And we have also seen it just go to zero. It has some smaller accounts, like around I want to say $500, 500 euros, around 3,000 to 4,000 kroner a day. So smaller accounts, just tank from one day to another when we make the switch over to Performance Max. So again, I recommend creating it outside of the upgrade button, so you don't have any of these additional assets inside. So going into some of the bad things about Performance Max, we'll talk about the Performance Max performance setup from a best practice standpoint, why I believe it's a no-go, why I don't trust Google, and this talk was delivered with Google actually sitting in the room. So there's a lot of technicalities to why I don't trust them with some of these things, and I'll explain why. We'll jump into the Performance Max shopping only versus standard shopping setup, where we'll explain how to use the priorities and some other things. And then we're answering the question, should you go back to standard shopping, and why you should never use manual bidding. So Karen has a question, why create a Performance Max for shopping only when you can create a standard shopping campaign? So there's certain things that when you have in your Performance Max campaign that you can't replicate in a standard shopping campaign. Adding standard shopping with smart bidding is not the same as just, let's use the old term, smart shopping or Performance Max shopping only. It's not the same thing. There are more ad formats that are useful for Performance Max than you'd get with just standard shopping. So yeah, but ask that question again later, and we'll gladly dig into it a little bit deeper. So the general performance max setup is not an advantage for most advertisers, and that's simply just based on the fact that it is search, shopping, display, and YouTube, and all the ad formats that result in one campaign. And that's like, if I look at it, then it wasn't a good idea 10 years ago to have search and display in the same campaign, the way that it all started with, and I actually think it's earlier than this, but it wasn't a good idea then, and it's not a good idea now to put all these in the same campaign type. There's no functionality for us to go in and then say, hey, we want YouTube to run after this conversion goal. We want display to run after this conversion goal. We don't care about the ROAS or wherever on YouTube, because we are only focusing on qualified eyeballs and clicks to the website, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's really not all advertisers that are highly focused on direct response with YouTube or display. Putting that all into one campaign, I do not see a use case for it, and I'll go more in depth with that in a second. But the biggest thing is, I just don't trust Google's ability these days. Like their smart bidding algorithm is great. It's awesome. We use it like as a default. We use it all the time, and it works really, really well these days. But there's so many things when we look at the actual accounts and things like this that just makes me just not trust their ability to put everything into one campaign. So the first example is like recommendations. Like the recommendations engine has been ranked the worst in a recent industry service. Nobody trusts them, and that's a little bit scary that these are based on algorithms within Google, that these are supposed to actually like make your account perform better. So if their recommendations are bad, and those recommendations are what you're actually telling, one of the parts you're telling Google, hey, you can just apply these like you want. So that's interesting. So a friend of mine put this on Twitter, like they're running a coding school, and this search trend came up. This search for airline tickets, fares, and flights have increased by 27% compared to the same period last year. For a coding school, like the keywords have nothing to do with airline tickets, fares, or flights. It's a coding school. Like, why is this recommendation coming up for a coding school? If they can't fix this, I don't see any way that they can run a black box where I don't get to see anything. We had this one earlier this year. Like, again, this is just from this year. This is just from the last few months, so nobody can sit and say, hey, the algorithm's gotten a lot better since 2017. Get it? That's not it. This is from this year. This is from May. It's literally just a few months ago, where we had these examples where we had some search terms show up, literally the same search term. You can see there's not a lot, but massive cost accrued over 2 rounds. All this was refunded. We've seen this in the past too. Like, again, this is March. This massive display on smart shopping. This is not something else, etc. This is just display spike. So again, I don't trust Google to put it all together in one in one campaign, and until they fix these inconsistencies, mistakes, errors, issues in plain sight. This was because we could see it. This was because we could see it. This was idiotic. But all of these issues, they're because we can see them. They're in plain sight. We've all run, I hope many of us have run a dynamic search test campaign where we've just gone like, why? Or I forgot to exclude this URL, or what is this search term doing here? And then we've been able to exclude it. So the other reasons why you should potentially skip a full performance max setup, again with the assets and everything, is that if you want to run YouTube or display, then do it right, do it properly, do it the right way. Set a creative strategy, set the right micro conversions, set the right KPIs in place. There's a completely different set of KPIs for what you want to run on a YouTube or display campaign strategy than there is for a search and shopping setup. If you want to mix shopping and search, like again, the search part of a performance max campaign is just dynamic search ads. Like I'd much rather have full insights into search terms, so that we have that in a separate campaign in a dynamic search ads campaign. I'm a huge fan of them. We run them on every single account we have. For e-commerce, it's pure gold. So mixing those two, I don't see a need for it. Like, we already have that capability in something else. Like, I don't see a need to push it in and mix it with shopping, where we don't have any insights into search terms. There is one caveat then, that if Google builds upon this, so they can see what terms are performing well in search and in shopping, and combining these two to really own ad real estate or ad inventory on search. I can see that being a cool thing if they could mix those two. There's no evidence that they're doing that right now, though. So should you go back to standard shopping? And my recommendation has changed a lot. Like I earlier this year was like, yes, yes, yes. But honestly, the more I've consulted, we do a lot of audits and Savvy for both other agencies, but like 80% are in-house teams that needs feedback or needs insights from, again, running an agency. You get a lot of touch with a lot of different accounts out there, so you see a lot of things. And I've just seen how there is not enough time or know-how in-house or even in agencies for that matter to run standard shopping. And that's really why I think there's a bigger chance that again 99% of people out there will mess up a standard shopping setup versus the no touch, no hands-on experience with the Performance Max. The one thing I will say is that if you have the insights like into sales or seasonality in your business, price competitiveness, or you have like these custom product scores, so you can divide what it is that, like, should you put these products in a high priority versus a medium priority, and yada yada yada. This is not a standard shopping campaign presentation, but if you have the insights, then you should go back to standard shopping campaign. There's a lot to do there. We've built some incredible setups using like just bestsellers these days that work much better than anything else that we've seen. And that's, like I mentioned, bestsellers for a specific example. Bestsellers have not been a good way to run shopping with a setup like that in the last 5 years. It's not been the best way. It is one of the best ways to be seen it lately. So that's really interesting. If you need access to like setting minimums and max CPCs and these priorities, like we talked about before, then it's also a good idea to go back to standard shopping. I've scratched out, I decided not to delete it because I actually think this is a positive on Performance Max setup. Google is trying to do more and more things and getting more things into the Performance Max setup. So back in June, there were not access to seasonal bid adjustments, which for me is huge. Like we use it all the time. And data exclusion, we also use that, albeit less, but it's a very, very important tool. But those are both accessible for Performance Max today, and I really like the roadmap that Google have for Performance Max. So you will have more access to more tools in the future. Manual bidding is almost pointless for shopping, and I get this question from time to time. Well, should I start with manual bidding? Should I do this? Like for shopping, it's more or less pointless to try to run manual bidding. So this is the smart bidding signals for shopping. It's not for search. It's for shopping. So in the initial 5 of price competitiveness, we have seasonality, of product attributes, we have the actual search query. It's a much bigger thing than people think. And then we have device. Outside of that, we have a lot of like the more like of the supporting aspects in terms of where people are located, what are the ad characteristics, interface language, location intent, marketing list, browser, OS, and weekday and time of day. So if you just take all the extra out, because then it becomes much more than I think that smart bidding actually have to, they don't have data to work with all of it. But when we look at this, so price competitiveness, seasonality, product attributes, actual search query, device, most of these we don't have access to bidding for. So if you try to bid with a manual, try to do manual bidding for shopping these days. And the reason why we're going through this is because this is why smart shopping did so much better than what most of you were running before. It's not because smart shopping was amazing. It's just because you try to do manual bidding for shopping. And this is why smart shopping did much better. So the actual search query, you don't have access to it with manual bidding. We used to do these keyword like splits and high and low converting and brand and non-brand and stuff like that. That's like, they are solely to get access to some way to bid for the search query. Smart bidding has direct access to, and that's why they do much better with shopping. Product attributes, we still can't, again, we can only do it if we set up a fairly advanced setup. Devices, yes, we have those like device adjustments, but it's not super efficient compared to smart bidding, but we do have access to it. Price competitiveness, again, requires advanced setup using priorities. Seasonality, again, requires advanced setup. Not just priorities, just different campaigns, but it's more of a advanced. setup. So never run manual bidding for shopping. So if we go into the ugly, why are there no effing insights to network? So this is not that long. There's not that many ugly things about it, but like, why are we not allowed to know how much whatever channel, whatever campaign type is spending or how well it converts? Because like, if there's a great YouTube performance, like let me invest in better videos so I can expand it further. Or if shopping is only spending 10% of my Performance Max campaign, I doubt that really happens, but you get the gist. Like, let's say search is spending 10%, shopping spending, like anything is spending too little. Like maybe there's something wrong with my product pages. This has happened many times before. What about if there's something wrong with the tracking on my product pages? What if there's something wrong? There's so many things that could be something wrong with. So if the right spend allocation isn't there, then something is wrong. Or if search is too narrow the focus, like what if it's only spending on brand or product model keywords, like not spending on generic, or vice versa, et cetera, et cetera. Like some of these insights are key to actually improving things. So I will not understand why they're not allowing us to see how much it spends on YouTube. If it is that they, or display for that matter. It's not, again, based on what we've seen so far, they're not spending a ton on YouTube and display. I would assume not here in the transition period. I think that would be ridiculous if they were doing so, because it might mean performance drop, and that's not what they're trying to do. Right now, they're trying to get everybody over on Performance Max, which makes a ton of sense. But why can't I know how much YouTube is spending? If it's spending a lot, I wanna invest in better videos. But if we're like, let's say we have a client, it happens all the time. So we have a client spending $100,000 a month, and let's say that we go to them and say, hey, you need to spend $10,000 or $20,000 on spending or doing better videos, and then we just plop it into a Performance Max campaign. Why are they not asking us? Why can't, like, when a client then asks us, what did we get out of that investment? We can't say anything because we can't say how much we spent on YouTube. That for me that's a deal breaker. I cannot go to a client, and I don't think anybody internally can go and say, hey, I want to spend 10 or 20 grand on an ad creative, but I don't know how much money we're going to put behind it. I don't know what the strategy is. So this is my key gist on what we're doing these days. And I said it on the Optimizer PPC town hall like last year as well. Like many of us like spent all of our days trying to find insights and trying to say, okay, what can we actually learn about this? What can we relay back to an advertiser so they can get better and we can grow a channel? It can display, YouTube search, shopping, etc. Not having any of those insights and just throwing everything into a Performance Max campaign. I have when we do audits, one of the things I see the most is like, there's this phrase in the US, you throw spaghetti on the wall and you see what sticks. It's not spaghetti, but you throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. That's kind of what's happening here. You just take everything you have, boom, and just throw it on the wall. And then whatever performs at the ROAS you set stays. That's what it still runs for. But everything else that goes away. So Performance Max and the likeness of that kind of account management, it can give you decent results and give you better results than what I would say most agencies can do, because most agencies suck. But it's not going to help you grow a channel outside the market. It's not going to help you figure out, why is this not working? Why are we not showing for this? Or what I hear the most, well, Google has decided to show these products, but I have these other products that I want to show instead. And that's ridiculous. Of course we can force Google to show the products that we want them to show. So I think all of this is a recipe for disaster long term. Again, this is the ugly part. This is where I was sitting and saying these things, looking directly on the global product lead for for Performance Max. So this is as ugly as it gets. It's not as doom and gloom as I just said. So if we're looking at how to optimize Performance Max and how to do it better, and there's just 5 minutes left of these slides, and we're going to go to questions. So please put in as many questions as you like. We'll keep going with questions until we're done. Again, it's 6 a.m. I have nowhere to be. But Performance Max still needs help. Feed optimization is a basic that you of course have to do. Like many people have just blasted that out. This is not a feed optimization presentation. We should probably do one. But segmented products is something that seems to work really well with Performance Max. So just to finalize that point, you definitely do feed optimization. It's a basic. It has to be done. When I say it's a basic, it means it's a fundamental. It has to be done. But splitting up campaigns, or splitting up products in separate campaigns. So this is an example of shopping ads only Performance Max campaign that we're running. So back in March, we applied some custom labels on these, some of the standard custom labels that we always apply. So we try to get some of these insights. So we try to say, okay, products on sale, what do they perform better than products not on sale? Again, this advertiser had a clear strategy around products on sale. So it was clear to actually go in and review this. So in March, we looked at it and we're like, okay, no sale, 120 Swedish crowns in cost and 1.5 ROAS. Anything that had that was on sale though, 15 to 20%, we had more or less a double return on ad spend. So you can just like the numbers are pretty clear in terms of spending half to get the same amount of revenue. The one that's unlabeled is just because we applied this we applied this custom label like 10 days into the month or something like that. So then we looked at April. Okay, we took action and we split the campaigns into two. We had a campaign for products on sale and a campaign for products not on sale. What that resulted in was that yes, we increased spend quite a bit, but the overall ROAS wasn't much better. So the no sale product actually didn't spend that much less. It went from 120 to 71. Like that's okay, but ROAS also declined. And then we saw a huge cost increase on products on sale now that we're starting to push it, which meant that we actually started decreasing on our ROAS. So what we started to do in May was that we said, okay, now we forced it even more to spend solely on the products that were on sale. So again, you can see how we've gone over 3 months. We went from spending 120,000 on products not on sale to 70 to 27. Again, ROAS is well, that's the same all the way through. But we then focused to spend a lot more on the products on sale, and which went to 256 and 447 there. And that's really like when you look at it over time. So cost went up in March when, again, we came on board in February, pushed the setup in March, spent more. We were allowed to, that was the budget, but ROAS wasn't where we wanted to be. Our initial focus in April in terms of spending more on actual promotions didn't work out. ROAS actually decreased, revenue actually decreased. So we doubled down and went, okay, now we know that this actually works. We've spent money on these things. We spent money on products on sale. Okay, now we just want to be more effective. So we took an account over 3 months from March to May, from basically the same revenue, but ROAS increased substantially. So that was quite a win in the end. And again, it gave us something to build on, and we've built on it ever since. So what did we actually do? We identified 3 segments: pricing level, products on sale, and what discount tier they were actually on. We analyzed the performance. We found out that discount tier was not relevant. Didn't matter if somebody was on 15% or 20%. Basically, performance was the same. This case was because they moved more products over to the 20%. So that's, again, we figured out that wasn't a big deal when we looked at the underlying data. The pricing level, though, and whether or not it was on sale was very relevant. So besides what you saw me talk about here in terms of splitting campaigns in two, we also made some other splits in terms of the pricing levels and some other things like that, so that we didn't spend money on products that were outside of our sweet spot in terms of pricing. So we took action on all these insights, and we changed course on the way. And that's what I really recommend you do with Performance Max. Again, I used to recommend it with Smart Shopping. I used to recommend it to everybody with Smart Shopping, and I'll continue to do it with Performance Max. This is a super powerful thing to do, and not just let Performance Max do nothing. Show it, like I always say, help Performance Max help you. So now, when you're looking at the big picture of everything, like, so decide, are you going to act? So if you're going to act on some of all this data that you have, again, price competitiveness, seasonality, and some of all these things, if you're not going to act, Performance Max is fine. Don't waste your time with standard shopping. Don't waste your time trying to learn it. Don't waste anything. Don't try to hire a bunch of agencies to do it. And again, I'm an agency. I run a 15-person agency in Europe, and we do this for a living. And I don't necessarily recommend you run with an agency just because I see how bad many of the agencies are out there. So only if they have a very, very good pitch for what it is that the standard shopping setup can do for you, like for instance we do, then you should spend time on it. Otherwise, focus your time elsewhere and don't get sucked into agencies saying that they can actually do it unless they have proof. But if you are going to act, if you are doing this, then there's a couple of things. One, you have to learn how to run a standard shopping setup. It is, I was surprised to see how many in-house teams have actually lost the capabilities. I never had them over the last couple of years to actually run a a standard shopping setup. So learn it, and then get the insights like we had here. Okay, we had insights, okay, on products on sale, or here, but pricing levels on sale versus not, and discount tier. And get the insights and then use the insights. You can still use Performance Max to actually utilize these insights if you're not going to use priorities. And then figure out, should it's Performance Max or standard shopping, and then expand on those insights. Remove the insights that do not work and that you don't need anymore, and replace them with other insights. And especially when I say insights, it's either from the back end or it's based on custom labels. That was it for today. Now we're going to jump into questions. So this is really what, this is just our background screen while I look at questions. So let me just move this over here so I can see it. So we have a Q&A and we have the chat bot. Q&A. Okay. Yes. So if we go through some of the questions that's come in from the beginning. Okay. So you can pause. Antonia says you can pause the market assets and build shopping only assets and upgrade campaign. Yes, that's what we've seen it a couple of times, but I just got to report it back from people that it was not possible any longer. How big of a role do audience signals actually have? Is it more of a guide to point Google in the right direction, or does it actually have a big impact? So the terminology here is so it will initially, when a campaign starts, it will focus on the assets or audience signals that you've added to the campaign. So initially, it'll spend the money there, but once it's spent your budget there and there's more budget to be spent, it will go into spending it on other audiences. So as a whole, as a big scale, no impact whatsoever. It's going to use audiences as Google know without any issues. But initially, it can help you get better results initially, which allows you to put in more money to move forward. So I'd say like, it is more of a guide to point Google in the right direction than having a huge impact over time. So Marco says, how can you create a Performance Max shopping only campaign when it won't allow you to publish campaigns with a minimum number of images, headlines? Again, there are very few instances, and again, the only time I've seen that is when somebody upgraded it, then it gave you an error. Otherwise, it has not been seen. So I highly recommend that you create a new Performance Max campaign for this purpose. So Paul asked, what is the 1% right setup for standard shopping that I'm referring to? So it's individual for every advertiser. Like I showed before, so this advertiser before had an on sale, had a very big focus on switching products around that was on sale all the time. focusing on products because that means that when you go from having a product that's been on sale for let's say a month, and then it stops being on sale, Google will still look at the historical performance and saying, hey, this actually is performing really well, but it's just at a slump. But I know that the second that product goes off sale, it stops selling completely. So I want to switch all of the focus on another product that's on sale. So in that case, creating a setup that has a high priority setting for products on sale is the way to go. For others, it's very, very different. It can be collection based, it can be bestseller based, it can be backend data based, it can be price competitiveness based. There's so many different ways to set this up. But the key thing is that it's unique for every single advertiser. So Stephanie Rogers asks, so Google claims it takes 13 to 15 days to learn once you make a change. Is that the same with Performance Max? Every change we make, it takes 2 weeks for Google to learn. Who has ever said that? Please elaborate. Like it really depends on the level of change. If you make a huge change to the target ROAS, then yes, it will take some time for it to actually adjust. But if you're making a minor change to the text, to the ads or audience signals and stuff, it's not like, it shouldn't have a major impact initially or even over time. Lisa asks, would you advise to when adding target group signals to split different signals up in different asset groups or put different signals together in one asset group? So this is really where I think that a lot of the confusion starts to happen because you have different advertisers. So now I know Lisa's from Netherlands, so we'll take an example. They have a huge e-commerce company there called Bol.com. It's like the Amazon, wow. It's like Amazon.com in the States. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of different products. In such a case, you want to create asset groups or even campaigns for the different categories so that you can set up different audience signals. Like the audience signal for I'm a runner is not the same for I want to read newspapers, and it doesn't target the same products. So when you have a products that you know will go to a different audience, then you can split it up into different asset groups. Otherwise, the only reason to use different asset groups is that if you need to actually use different images, different images, different videos, write different text ads, and that's something that, again, shouldn't we then just not run a Performance Max setup? Laura says she's having a hard time getting a positive ROAS. CPCs have risen from 20 to 25 cents to 60 cents, and since I fairly cheap price and people are only buying one, it's hard to get a positive ROAS. What would you do in such a case? In such a case, I would highly recommend going to a standard setup. And if you don't have it already, first step, remove all assets if you have any assets. If that doesn't work and you're still seeing this, try to lower the budget. Lowering the budget tells Google to focus more on the more profitable aspects of the campaign. And that's especially true if you're not spending the budget. If all that doesn't work, you have to go into more of the more advanced aspects of it and trying to say, okay, you run a standard shopping setup that allows you to set a max CPC in the portfolio so you don't spend too much. Bruno says, I remember when it first launched and you said you would remain a standard shopping advocate. I was wondering how much you guys are using now after all these learnings. So the initial, when it came out, I didn't know about being able to run it as basically smart shopping. So at this point, I would still say all the accounts that we used to have on Smart Shopping and Savvy, they have been moved over to running on Performance Max shopping only, just because there's so much. Like when you only have like one campaign and you have no use for priority settings, you have no use for insights into search terms, Smart Shopping just outperformed the standard shopping setup. And honestly, like I spoke to many in the industry, Kirk and others, like nobody here can really figure out why. We have some ideas to why it does it, but there's some functionality that made Smart Shopping a better choice than just a single standard shopping campaign. And I still believe it's the same thing today. Yannick asks, what has been the impact of deleting all the assets of Performance Max on your actual performance? So I actually don't know. We never did. Like I've never. Again, I don't see a case for taking a highly well-run e-commerce account and then going, okay, now we're in Performance Max with the full setup, and now we remove all the assets. We actually haven't done it yet. We're just about to close on a case where we're about to do it, but they decided not to move forward. If so, Vidas asks, should you run full scale all assets Performance Max if it's giving you great results? Yes. The only thing, and he asked just himself there, should you remove branded keywords? I would highly recommend removing branded keywords. So once you start out and you're starting running with, if your branded keywords are part of it, there's many layers to this, but this is the basic version of it. Once you start with running with branded keywords, and let's say you have let's say you have 500 conversions a month from branded and 500 conversions from non-branded. The 500 conversions from branded will have, let's say, a 50-to-1 ROAS. Again, it depends on the states. On Europe, the state side is a lot less than in Europe because of competition on branded terms. But let's go with me here. So you have 50x on half your conversions, and you have, let's say, 1x on all generic. Because that's blended together and you can't see what the actual performance is on one or the other, then you just set a target and you say, okay, I want to target 5-to-1. But if that means that all of the generic is run at, or non-branded is run at a 1-to-1 ROAS, and everything else on your branded is running from a 50-to-1, and it adds up to 5-to-1, that's the whole like, I don't want to say scam, but that was the whole issue with bad account managers. Like when they used to do this in Google Ads campaigns, it meant that that's not your actual performance. Like if you're only running search, you can kind of argue, like if you're only running Google, you kind of argue you can take credit for them, but at the same time, no. But if you're running any kind of other advertising, you cannot take credit for all of your for branded terms like that. Pavel, if I already upgraded, would you recommend creating a new Performance Max campaign with no assets to achieve shopping only? Only if you're not able to remove assets. If you can remove assets, stick with campaign. It's great to have the data in there already. Hassan asks, is it better to build up a bunch of creative assets or to trickle them in one by one when updating asset groups? Is it better to build up a bunch of creative assets or to trickle them in one by one when updating asset groups? So I highly recommend. To just like. So I don't like either. I like adding the amount of assets that allows Google to actually optimize based on it. So if you're adding, let's say, in this case, you say a client can't generate more than the 1 to 2 assets per week, I would stick with that and maybe just launch them once a month. The whole idea is that instead of adding, let's say, it's the same thing with headlines and responsive search. Instead of adding 15, add 5, figure out which ones perform the best, which can be hard, add 5, and then replace them over time. Because the whole gist with adding too many assets in there, like I think some of us have an advantage here because we used to run all this manually. So we used to see how little data that was available. If you just ran 5 or 10 text ads, you could barely get enough statistical significance to actually do anything about it. So I don't like adding too many assets because I don't think Google has the data to actually run them all at the same time. Victor asks, for someone who don't run much shopping ads but search YouTube and display, would Performance Max be a wise choice if the detailed competence isn't there? Oh, you're hitting me a little bit on yes. I'm biased because I know how many things can go wrong, but if you don't have the competencies to run proper YouTube and display, then Performance Max is intended to be self-optimizing. So yes, then I would run Performance Max. Alexander asks, I can see in my Performance Max overview 32 conversions, but in the product tab, I can only see 3.5 conversions attributed to products. Does that mean the sales come from search, display, and YouTube? Potentially. I'm not 100% sure, but I would say yes. That's what's happening there. Lots and lots of questions. When breaking out your shopping feed into different tiers, would you recommend breaking it out into different asset groups within one Performance Max campaign, or different or separate Performance Max campaign? It depends what kind of tiers, but yes, I would. If you're breaking out a shopping feed into different tiers, it depends what the tiers are built on. But yes, I would recommend that. However, I would not recommend doing it immediately. Just applying a custom label takes 10 minutes or an hour at tops, depending how hard it is to get the data. So you can get the data, wait a month, and see how does this data in my current campaign setup actually function. I can't tell you how many times we've tried to like predict what was going to happen. For instance, like in the example I had before, where like we thought that a certain custom label would, or an insight would actually have a big impact. It didn't, and that's happened many times. So before you start rebuilding your campaign setup all the time, every single time you want to try to do an insight or add a custom label, wait a month to see what happens. If you like, let's give you an example. If you label everything with bestsellers and non-bestsellers, and then you build your campaigns out like that. I can't tell you how many times we've actually done that. And before we built the campaigns out, we were able to see that, well, bestsellers were already being shown first. So there's no need to actually build it out. Lars asks, what are your recommendations on multiple PMax campaigns? So instead of just running one campaign with all your products, you run 4 because you can then target your asset groups more specifically. I don't think there's anything in terms of targeting asset groups more specifically. The biggest thing in terms of splitting up Performance Max campaigns is to set different budgets and different ROAS targets. That's the key there, in my opinion. And it's super duper powerful. I would highly recommend everybody to do it. You can also do it in terms of like seasonality, and just if you want to have the insights and say, oh, now we're moving into fall, I want my fall collection or like winter clothes outerwear, I want that to start being shown more. If you have it in a separate campaign, you can decrease your ROAS target for it or increase the budget, and it will start going up there. So Antonia is trying to do a workaround on Performance Max by saying, what if we use different asset groups? So one asset group can have only shopping assets, and another asset group will have dedicated text or display ads with dedicated signals and the possibility to turn them off if they do harm. Why not just use a standard shopping campaign with smart bidding? Why not just use dynamic search ads? Why not just use display ads? Why not use a marketing campaign? Why do we have to push it into Performance Max? There's no need, like if you do it like that, there's no need to push it into Performance Max. So Emil asks, how would a campaign setup look for a fashion e-commerce store own brand with a monthly budget of $2,000 US? But just too low, depending where you are in the world. Emil Saisset Rasmussen, probably Danish, so you can start there. But it's fine. So depends a little bit. If you're already launching within, if you're pure and you're new with your brand, you need to spend all your money on generic search. Or generic search terms, not even necessarily search, but shopping, so people can actually see the product, see the price tag. Spend all your money there because that's what you're going to build exposure to your brand. If you already have a big brand and you are you're in a couple of department stores and stuff like that, then you can start with trying to say, okay, I want the people are already now searching for my brand. I want to get as many of those over to my own store as possible. So then I would start with the branded setup. I would not, it depends on your competencies, I would not necessarily start with the Performance Max setup. But if you were looking to do it and you didn't have anybody helping you and you didn't know a lot about Google overall, then I would potentially just create the assets and then throw it all in a Performance Max campaign. That's really a really good purpose for $2,000 a month. So our minimum for starting managing accounts is around $2,500 a month. So we would eat up your entire budget that you should be using on spend. And let's say you take a lesser agency that's $1,000 a month. They would take half of your budget that would go and that would go to them instead of spending on unspent. Performance Max is now wasting half your money. An agency would, no matter how good they are, they can't get much more out of that than that. So I'll do a full Performance Max setup in that case. Alexander asks, what's your experience with the feature new customer acquisition? I'm not a huge fan, just because the way that it works is that you give an extra value to new customers based on some certain settings. I like the overall feature. I just don't like the way it's used in many accounts because a lot like the way that it works in a lot of places. And so far, actually, I haven't tried it in Performance Max, seen how it works. But the way it's worked so far is that kind of feature in Smart Shopping and other places. It adds a value to your conversion value. So where you used to have, let's say, $100 per conversion, if you add $50 for new conversions, then it's in the interface going to show that conversion was worth $150. And if you've set a ROAS target and stuff like that, and you look at the total amount inside the interface, that's going to be completely wrong. So I don't like that part about it. But overall, in terms of nudging over towards new customer acquisitions, love it. Huge. Alfred says, I get the idea for moving brand keywords. They were always present in the Smart Shopping campaign, and we never worry about it. Why is it so much different in Performance Max? Alfred, I'll tell you why. You and I have never met. It's like I will never ever understand anybody. Again, it depends on what the layer is, but we've worked with some really big retail stores that didn't care either, and I don't know why. If 90% of your conversions come from brand, and then you start increasing your spend, you're gonna get a lot low. It's gonna look like your ROAS just goes down. And that's the whole gist with including the brand. If your brand isn't that big, or it's like, again, under 100 conversions a month, or depending relative to the overall account size, it doesn't really matter. But if you do have a popular brand, it's a massive, massive potential issue that you don't know what your ROAS is for your branded campaigns and your non-brand. So, let me give you an example. Just from recently, we've worked with a big company in the pharmacy space, and they started out giving us a total target, like including brand. Problem was sometimes they ran TV, sometimes they ran huge radio and outdoor programs. Sometimes they pushed a ton of money into to paid social, and sometimes they ran they sent out email on specific days that also made brand go up. So we were standing there after a month trying to explain why has ROAS increased or decreased, and we were like, when we looked at the total amount, the performance went like this. When we looked at non-branded, it went like this. It was much more possible to do a proactive approach to it, where we could actually see what it was outside of all the other factors like TV, like paid social, like email, and other aspects of it. With that being said, I actually have to go. I had a meeting started 5 minutes ago. If you have any more questions, we're gonna throw this on YouTube. Send it to me on an email. We're gonna do a second setup in terms of doing Q&A on Performance Max. We'll do more learnings in the afternoon. If you guys have anything you want, then let me know. Just shoot me an email. I respond to everything myself. If you guys liked it, let me know. If you didn't like it, let me know. If you have any questions, just let me know. We are looking for 2 advertisers to add to our roster for this Q4. So if anybody's interested in seeing what we could do and how we would potentially use a standard shopping setup to create more insights, use more control, use your backend data in order to actually create these setups, just let me know. I'm at andrew@savvyrevenue.com.